Hey guys, Mr. G here. Here's what we're going to take a look at next, and that is curriculum. And this is something I really wish that we could do in class together because it's going to spawn a lot of, hopefully, a lot of questions, a lot of uh, pondering. What is this really about? How do we go about deciding what we're going to teach? And I know you guys are working on your lesson plans, and largely, so let me say up front, uh, to a degree, what you're teaching is kind of beyond your control. You don't get to teach something just because you find it interesting. You don't get to teach something even just because the students find it interesting. You've got set by the state standards that you have to teach. So I think I've shared this before. As much as I love that aspect of the American West and Native American culture and the Indian Wars, the truth is, in my content, it just is considered maybe a minor point that maybe I brush up on, give some interesting details, and encourage kids to look up on their own, make myself available to them if they have questions. But I don't teach that. That's not one of my standards. Um, so I'm not talking about what content we have to teach because that is set by the state. What I'm talking about is how do we approach it in a way that whatever it is that you're teaching seems relevant. So in chapter 9, you're going to take a look at, pardon me for having this right in front of me, the power of student designed curriculum and exceeding standards. And I like this quote here on 133. It says, curriculum is relevant when it allows students to pursue answers to questions they have about themselves, the content, and the world. Okay, so if we think about that, that's simple, but it's pretty profound. Of course, it's relevant when they can relate to it. So here's what we don't want to fall in. So part of your reading, you're going to take a look at like how education is revolutionized after Sputnik is launched. And for those of you that, I hope you're aware of this, but in 1957, Russia launched the first satellite, Sputnik. It's about the size of a basketball. But it completely changed everything. The idea that a satellite, something that we don't give any thought to today because our cell phones all rely on this, our GPS. But when it first happened, the idea of a satellite, something orbiting the Earth perpetually, and what might that mean? And it's from Russia, and this dawns the space race. Within 12 years, we've got a man on the moon. Something unheard of and unreally thinkable as a realistic aspiration just not long before that. But it changes education too. The United States says, hey, if this is our new reality, we need to make sure our kids are well educated in mathematics and science, and it changes the focus of education. So what we're going to take a look at, what I want you to question as you read chapter 9, and what I want you to respond to is, if we know learning is real when kids find it relevant to themselves, and at the same time, we don't have a lot of control over what the topics are that we're teaching. Now, certainly we have control about how we approach our lessons. Okay, that's where the art of teaching comes into it, and you as a person comes into it. But as far as our standards, those are set for us. So my question, what I want you to think about is, if learning is relevant when students see how it connects to them, our job is to help them see how it connects to them. So depending on your content, and we're all different content, but for me as a history teacher, I have an obstacle. Hopefully I'm successful in that, but my obstacle is to convince these kids that something that happened back in the past is still relevant to them, to demonstrate how do we make that connection so that they see that this is something that, oh, this really does explain something, and now I better understand it. Um, the most important thing I think for us in as history is to help them understand the government process, so that they're not easily led by emotions. They understand the facts of here's how this works. Um, but in terms of really everything, helping them make a connection. So as history teacher, we use a lot of analogies. A kid hasn't fought in a war. They have no idea what that might be like. So that seems disjointed because they're still in that concrete phase. So we've addressed this before. It all interplays. But if I can use an analogy and they can share that experience, they haven't fought in a war, but they've played in a ball game that to them seemed just as important. And maybe they were going up against a superior team, or they thought so. And there they have a connection and say the colonists standing up to the British. So our job as a teacher is to somehow make these lessons that we're teaching relevant to our kids so that their learning is real. Because otherwise, if your students at a concrete level of learning and you're presenting them with information that they don't connect to, at best they're memorizing. They're memorizing steps, or they're memorizing facts, or they're memorizing rules for grammar, or whatever it may be. Your job as a teacher is somehow make that relevant to them so that they see that connection. So chapter 9 is our next assignment. I want you to read that, and we're just going to have a discussion. I want to remind you, you have to fully explain yourself, okay, because we're not in class to have the discussion face-to-face. And you must interact with at least 2 other people on content. Okay, so not like, hey, I really like your essay, or I really like your PowerPoint, or whatever you choose. I don't care how you go about presenting your understanding. That's up to you. You can record a screencast of yourself talking. I'm fine with that. That's what I'm doing. But whatever it is that you do, your interaction needs to be on content with somebody else. So if someone does make a screencast video of them explaining, you can't just say, hey, that was a really neat screencast. How'd you get those sound effects in there? That's not on content. So keep it on content. Add a compliment, fine, but keep the bulk of your interactions on content. And again, I'm right here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate.